Hi there, it's Sarah here from BJC Health, coming to you from Sydney, Australia. Thanks for showing an interest in one of our educational events. You're about to watch part one, so enjoy the event. If you've got any questions about the content, then please consider joining BJC Connect, where you can access all of our facilitators live. Otherwise, please consider leaving a comment and we'll do our best to get back to you.
Hey everyone, I'm Adrian. I'm a psychologist. I work in Sydney. Thanks, Sarah. So tonight, I'll be talking a lot about anxiety, some strategies, but also just ways to manage anxiety and just to live with it rather than trying to necessarily get rid of it. So I'll share my screen. Okay, so first off, it's good to, I guess, just unpack anxiety and go over what it actually is, where it comes from. Maybe a lot of you already know what anxiety is, or you have already experienced it in different ways, in different settings. But sometimes we forget, where it actually comes from and the function of it. So the word anxiety, I think a lot of people see it as a negative thing, or we associate it as a negative experience because it's not a very pleasant experience. I'm sure we all agree that when we do feel anxious, it's not something that we want to feel. So the word anxiety, we want to kind of unpack that and look at, okay, what does it actually mean? So a lot of the time, when we feel anxious, we are fearful of something in the future or something that is unknown. And this is where we feel fear. So anxiety comes from the emotion of fear. And every emotion that we feel has a function to it. It helps us achieve an outcome or get something done. And it alerts us to something. So when we feel an emotion, it prepares us to do something about it. So for example, if we feel anger, if you're feeling angry, the function of anger is to help us change something, or when we've been wronged by something, or we want to correct something that maybe we've seen as being unfair, or we've been mistreated. So anger helps us or motivates us to do something with it. So same thing with anxiety and fear. So when we feel fear, it's our body's response to protect us from harm or getting hurt. And we need this to essentially survive and to stay alive. So if you think of certain situations where you feel a sense of fear, and it's actually helped you or protect you from harm, so it could be, you're about to cross the road and a car flies by and you take a step back automatically and you get that, the butterflies in your stomach, or you feel on edge. Or maybe it's that it could be that you're standing on top of a cliff, or about to do bungee jumping or something like that. Your body thinks, well, if I jump, I could die. So I'm going to alert you to this, so that you're aware of this and that you do something about it to keep yourself alive. So there are just a couple of examples. So in general, it's our brain's way of alerting us when we could be put in harm's way, or it's a threat to our survival. And we've had this part of our brain all throughout evolution. And it goes back to when we were cavemen, and where we had to really find, really simple ways of surviving in nature. And there were threats every day. And these threats were, actual threats, not just perceived threats. So, if we were out in the wild, out in the jungle, things are going to harm us. Maybe there weren't as many things around us to protect us like there is now. So the annoying part of all of this is that because we still have this part of the brain, um, it's not always accurate. So the alarm bells go off, even if it's not an actual threat. So our brain is very, very, very sensitive to our environment. And our brain's always looking for things that could be a threat to our survival. It's constantly scanning, it's constantly detecting things that could go wrong. And in one way, we need that. And like I said before, it can be helpful at times, but sometimes it's not so helpful and it's not actually accurate. It's not an actual threat. So if you look at anxiety as like our alarm system or like an alarm bell in our brain, um, rather than this illness or that there's something wrong happening in my body, it can be anxiety can lead to other problems, or there are anxiety disorders, but anxiety itself is not an actual problem or something that we need to necessarily get rid of. And I put the lion there as an example of, an actual threat. And we needed that alarm system to help us from those actual threats. So in terms of what happens in the brain, I try and keep it simple. So the brain it can be seen in three different parts. You've got the brainstem, the limbic system, and the frontal lobe or the prefrontal cortex. So the frontal lobe is that big part of the brain, at the front. And this part of the brain is responsible for things like concentrating, taking in information, planning things, visualizing, taking in certain memories or interpreting information. And this is essentially what makes us human compared to other mammals. We've got this human brain. It's what makes us think. The limbic system is responsible for our emotional processing. And there's a part of that system that's called the amygdala. And the amygdala is the part of the brain that activates our emotions or activates the fear response. So what happens is that something happens in our environment. The brain will send messages to the amygdala to say, oh, something's not right here. Let's sound the alarm. The amygdala will then activate certain chemicals and hormones to be released in the body. And that's what we feel anxious. We have all these certain sensations and experiences in the body when we feel fear or anxiety. In terms of what happens in the body, so when the amygdala is set off or the alarm bells go off, our body then needs to respond. And these responses keep us alive. So the main goal for this is to remove the threat and to get back to safety. So some of you may have heard of these terms before. So fight mode, this is where our body will try to move towards the threat to try to get rid of it. So this could look like actually confronting something or someone. It could be that we have a lot of energy stored up in the body and we just need to release it, and we need to try and get rid of it by moving towards it. So sometimes, again, this happens when we get angry, and sometimes people who seem very irritable or angry, or maybe defensive or just wanting to be in attack mode. Underneath that, it's actually probably a lot of the time it's actually anxiety. It's the body is in a heightened state. It's in this sort of survival mode, but it's coming out as anger or irritability. And that's why it's called that sort of fight mode. Again, if you think of back in the caveman days, fight mode would be, literal fighting. And, that sort of idea that you just got to fight it out and try and survive. Flight mode is where we are moving away from the threat. And this is probably the most common response with fear and anxiety. It makes sense because a lot of the time, if there's something that we're fearful of, we want to move away from it. We don't want to go towards it. We want to, run away from it. So this looks like a lot of avoidance. Could be going into a different place, trying to distract ourselves. So anything to do with a sense of avoidance that will give us relief. There's also freeze mode where the body thinks, well, okay, I can't fight this. Running away or avoiding it's not going to help me either. So the best thing to do right now is to do nothing and to not move, just to shut down and try to block this out of my reality right now. And if I can try and block it out of my reality, then I don't have to think or feel anything related to the threat. And eventually, hopefully, the threat will just go away. And then fawn, it's not as common with anxiety, but I thought I'd still mention it. It's quite common for people who have trauma or have trauma responses. So fawn is where we will people please or we will appease the threat. So it's this sort of idea, if I try to make things better or if I appease, whatever the threat is, then I won't get hurt and I have a better chance of survival. So these responses are purely to survive. That's our goal. But like I said before, majority of times now in 2024, they're not actual life or death situations that we're in. They're not actual threats, but we still have these responses. And so it's good to be aware of this because these responses are going to be with us throughout our whole life. And they're not always going to be as, obvious or literal as, back in the caveman days. So anxiety or these sort of responses can then lead to lots of different sensations and symptoms that come with anxiety. So we have like different thoughts, physical sensations, emotions, and certain behaviors. So I thought it'd be a good chance now for anyone, if they can, to put in the chat. Just be nice to see what your experiences are or what some examples could be of these sensations or symptoms that come with anxiety. So yeah, your thought processes, worries, physical sensations, what you physically feel, other emotions that you might feel, and behaviors. So what you notice, what it leads to. So things like, trembling, racing heart, funny tummy, numb hands, migraines, yes, needing to problem solve, it's a good one, which we'll talk about in a bit. Panic attacks, upset tummy, dizzy, sleeplessness, dry mouth. I get that a lot when I'm anxious. I get a dry mouth. Insomnia, craving for sugar, that's an interesting one. Hot head. So again, a lot of these experiences are very common. And all these sensations are our body's response to the chemicals and hormones that are going through the body while we're anxious. So a lot of the time it's a response from adrenaline. Because when we're anxious, the body pumps through a lot of adrenaline in the body, and cortisol as well. And these then lead to certain changes in our digestive system, our immune system. We become dehydrated. Our heart is pumping faster because there's a lack of oxygen. Because the oxygen or all the blood flow is going to our limbs because our brain thinks that if there's a threat, I need to act fast. So I need to grip things, and I want the blood flow to go to your limbs so you can run and you can grip and you can hold things and you can fight. So it has this massive ripple effect on everything else in the body. And then what happens is it just becomes very unpleasant. And we have all these sort of sensations and feelings, and they're just not nice to feel. And that's where, we start to then associate anxiety as something bad or something negative. So just a few others: memory shuts down, adrenaline rush, personal global warming, hot sweat, procrastinate, yeah, avoidance, over explaining, yeah, muscle tension, yeah, it's a common one. Ruminating, yeah, yeah. Okay, so we'll just move on. So I thought I'd show you this as well. So this is what happens when we get anxious and we continue to avoid, or we try to run from it. So what happens? We get really anxious. Our body and our brain is heightened. We become extra sensitive to things around us. We're constantly scanning for danger. Our attention narrows and we start to really fixate on the perceived threat. Physical symptoms intensify. What also happens is that the frontal lobe of our brain isn't as effective. We don't have as much capacity to think our way through it. So our brain thinks that if I'm in survival mode, we need to prioritize survival. So the frontal part of the brain almost goes offline. We don't really use it. So we become very sometimes impulsive or reactive. We don't really think things through. And this is why it's common that for people who are worrying a lot or are anxious, that they might struggle to read or concentrate. So you think of, when you're anxious and you're reading a book, and you might be, reading the actual words, but your capacity and ability to understand what you're reading, comprehending it, and then remembering it and making sense of it becomes a lot more limited. So all this does is that we become very we're basing our responses on instinct and survival. And a lot of the time that goes to flight response, which, leads to wanting to escape, wanting to avoid. And we get short-term relief from this, but that tricks our brain into thinking, oh, okay, I'm all right now. But what happens is that it actually maintains the anxiety, because in the long term, we actually worry more. We lose our confidence in ourselves to actually cope with it. We have this increased use of what's called safety behaviors. So safety behaviors are all the behaviors that we do to try to numb or avoid feeling anxious. And what this does over time is that it just, again, fuels the anxiety, keeps it there, and it tells the brain that you got to keep worrying about this and you can't feel this again. So it's something to keep in mind, because whilst avoidance can give us short-term relief, in the long term, it doesn't always help. Okay, so another form of anxiety, or another way of describing anxiety, some people may have heard this term health anxiety. So it's quite common, and the reason why we, get anxious about our health is because our brain perceives ill health or an illness as a threat to our survival. And sometimes it actually will be a threat to our survival. So sometimes when we do have ill health, or we do have a illness or even a symptom that's new or foreign, our brain's like, oh, what's this? This isn't good. We need to check this out. We need to do something about this. So sometimes it can actually be helpful. And this is where it goes back to that every emotion has a function, and it tells us something. That doesn't mean that what we feel is always going to be accurate or based on facts. So this is where, again, the health anxiety can be maintained because it just becomes this sort of constant feeling that something's wrong. Um, and what happens again with anxiety is that our brain thinks that if you're anxious, then we need to try to regain control of our environment to maintain survival. So then what happens with, particularly with health anxiety, it's this sort of idea that um, I got to try to regain control. I got to try and fix it. I got to do something with it. I got to try to get rid of it. I'm going to talk about it to everyone. It's going to be in the forefront of my mind. I'm going to be fixating on the feeling a lot of the time. And then there's this constant feeling that something's wrong. And again, that just maintains anxiety. We're telling the brain that we got to keep, ringing the alarm bells. So this is, again, we know what health anxiety is, and it's something that we all can experience. And it's something just to keep an eye on when we do experience certain physical illnesses or chronic conditions as well. Another form of anxiety, which some of you may have heard, is called anticipatory anxiety. So what this simply means is that we are anticipating the worst when there's uncertainty or when there's something that will happen in the future that we're unsure about, and we don't know if we're going to be able to cope with that or the outcome. So when there's doubt or uncertainty, we then start to, again, it triggers the anxiety. A common behavior that people engage in is Dr. Google. So this is where we Google our symptoms. We want to find out what's wrong. We want to find out what other people are experiencing. Maybe we're experiencing certain symptoms that we haven't discussed with anyone yet. And so we think, okay, well, maybe I need to go onto Google and that will tell me. And then all of a sudden, we've got all these different potential diagnoses and disorders that come up, and it's saying, that you got to, go to emergency or see a doctor right now, and it could be this. And Dr. Google will provide every single possibility. And that actually overwhelms the brain. It overwhelms us. And again, that just increases our anxiety. It's telling the brain there's something to worry about because it could be all these things. What if it's cancer? What if it's a brain tumor? What if I will have a heart attack? What if it is that condition that my grandparent had that they said to warn me about? So we start to have all these sort of hypotheticals going on. Other examples could be when we're waiting for test results. So this could be where we got, certain experiences, and there's again a lot of uncertainty around what you'll actually go through or what the result will be. Another common experience is comparing symptoms. So when someone else experiences similar symptoms to you, and then you then compare your experiences to them. So that will also trigger anxiety. So all up, it's just this sort of anticipation of the worst. And it leads to a lot of excessive thinking and worrying. So I've gone through a lot about what anxiety is, what it looks like, different responses, what happens in the brain, threats to survival. But now I guess, I'm sure some of you are probably thinking, okay, well, what do we do about it? Because, yeah, it's not a nice feeling and it's not always accurate. And we don't always want to be experiencing this when it's not needed. So the overall goal is to reduce anxiety to a stage where the brain can turn the alarm bell off. and teach the brain that it's a false alarm and it's not always going to be a threat to our survival. So with anxiety, again, when we try to regain control or certainty, we start to form beliefs that, okay, well, I've got to fix it. I've got to get rid of it. This is bad. I don't want to feel this. Give me a quick fix. And we want to be mindful of that mentality because, like I said before, anxiety is functional and sometimes it can be helpful and normal to experience. So we want to, I guess, accept it sometimes. We want to embrace it. That doesn't mean we have to surrender to it. It just means that we have to accept that it's a normal physiological response that we've always had. The other goal with anxiety as well is that we want to bring back our frontal lobe capacity. So this is about bringing back the human brain back online. And that will help us think more rationally, think more logically, and interpret information based on reality rather than this sort of, strong fear response that we're experiencing. This takes a lot of practice. So again, with anxiety, there's no quick fix, and even the strategies to manage anxiety and to reduce it and to bring back that frontal lobe capacity, it takes a lot of practice and consistency. You're essentially teaching your brain new habits, and that takes time.
So you've just finished watching part 1 of one of our recent educational events. Hope you enjoyed the content. If you'd like to access part 2, then you need to sign up for BJC Connect. It's a free platform where you can access not just the recordings of past events, but also access a whole range of upcoming future events and access our team of facilitators live. All of the details that you need to join BJC Connect are now flashing up on your screen. But otherwise, like our staff, subscribe if you'd like to see more information from BJC Health. Look forward to seeing you in an event soon.